Admiral Krex stood before the holographic display, his scale fingers drumming against a metallic command console. The Vordak Empire had conquered 700 worlds, each one falling within solar cycles of first contact. Earth, however, had been different, troublingly different. Sir, Lieutenant Vex called from her station, her voice carrying that particular tension that meant bad news. We're receiving another transmission from a human delegation. Krex's mandibles clicked in irritation. 3 months. 3 entire months since their initial assault on Earth's outer colonies. And still these humans refused to surrender. Worse, they kept winning. Put it through, he growled, expecting another pompous speech from one of their military leaders. Instead, a middle-aged human woman appeared on the screen. She wore simple civilian clothes, a faded blue garment they called jeans, and what looked like a knitted sweater. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she held a steaming cup of some brown liquid. She looked like someone's grandmother, not a military commander. "Good morning, Admiral Krex," she said pleasantly, taking a sip from her cup. "I'm Sarah Chen. I believe we need to have a little chat." Krex's eyes narrowed. "Where is your military commander?" "I do not negotiate with civilians." Sarah's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind her eyes. "Oh, Admiral, that's your first mistake. You see, on Earth, we don't really distinguish between military and civilian the way you do. It's a cultural quirk of ours." "Ridiculous," Krex spat. "Send me someone with actual authority." "I have all the authority I need," Sarah replied, her voice still maddeningly calm. "In fact, I probably have more authority than you realize. But before we continue, I thought you might want to know what happened to Fleet Commander Thane." Krex's blood ran cold. Thane commanded their advanced reconnaissance fleet, 12 ships that had gone silent near Jupiter's moons 3 days ago. "What do you know about Thane?" Sarah took another sip of her drink. "Well, let me see. Tall fellow, purple skin, nasty habit of executing prisoners. Had a really impressive ship called the Devastator. Past tense being the operative term there. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems." "Impossible," Krex whispered. "Thane commanded 12 heavy cruisers." "Yes, he did. Lovely ships, really. We particularly appreciated the titanium composite hull plating. Very useful for our own shipbuilding programs." Sarah's smile grew wider, revealing perfectly human teeth that somehow looked predatory. "Would you like to know how we took them?" Despite himself, Krex leaned forward. "It started with a little old man named Bob. Bob Martinez, actually, 73 years old, retired maintenance worker from New Mexico. Loves fishing, makes terrible jokes, and has 11 grandchildren." Sarah paused to take another sip. "Bob also happens to be one of Earth's most decorated combat veterans, though you'd never know to look at him." She gestured off-screen, and the camera panned to show an elderly man in a rocking chair, wearing a cardigan and reading a newspaper. He looked up and waved cheerfully. Bob was part of the welcoming committee when Thane's ships arrived at Europa Station. Sarah continued. "You see, Thane made the same mistake you're making right now. He saw an old man in civilian clothes and assumed he was harmless." Krex's claws dug into his console. "Get to the point, human." "The point, Admiral, is that Bob and his fishing buddy spent 30 years fighting in the Titan Wars. They're experts in zero-G combat, shipboarding, and something we call aggressive negotiation. When Thane demanded Europa Station surrender, Bob invited him aboard for peaceful discussion." The camera returned to Sarah, whose eyes had gone completely flat and cold despite her continued smile. "Thane brought a full security detail. 20 of your best warriors, all armed with plasma rifles and wearing combat armor. Bob brought cookies. And Bob's cookies are terrible, but his reflexes are still excellent. It took him and his 3 friends exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds to neutralize Thane's entire boarding party. Thane himself lasted almost 6 minutes. He was tougher than he looked." Krex felt his throat constrict. "You're lying." "Oh, Admiral, I never lie. I find the truth so much more effective." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "Would you like to know what happened next?" Before Krex could respond, she continued. "You see, once Bob and his friends had control of Thane's flagship, They did what humans do best. They improvised. Bob had spent 40 years maintaining Starship engines, so he knew exactly how to overload a fusion reactor. His friend Jim used to be an explosives expert, so he knew how to turn cleaning supplies into weapons. And Maria, sweet old Maria, who makes the most wonderful apple pie, she used to be our best electronic warfare specialist. Sarah's smile was now completely gone. Within an hour, they had turned Thane's own ships against each other. By the time our real military arrived, there wasn't much left to clean up, just debris and some very confused Vortex survivors who kept babbling about demon grandparents. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. Krex's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. But that's not the best part, Sarah continued, her cheerful tone returning. The best part is that Bob and his friends, they're not special. They're just regular humans. We have millions like them. She leaned forward, her face filling the screen. You see, Admiral, Earth has a peculiar history. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've gotten very, very good at it. But we've also learned something important. The most dangerous weapon isn't the one your enemy sees coming. Krex's voice was barely a whisper. What are you saying? I'm saying that every human you see, every civilian, in every colony, every shopkeeper and farmer and schoolteacher, they all have stories. Stories of conflicts you can't imagine, training you wouldn't believe, and skills that would terrify you if you truly understood them. Sarah stood up, and the camera pulled back to reveal she was standing in what looked like a command center filled with displays and tactical information. My grandmother was a sniper in the Third Colonial War. My father designed weapon systems for the Mars Defense Grid. My daughter is currently serving on the front lines of 3 different conflicts you don't even know about yet. And me. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I spent 20 years in deep space reconnaissance, learning how to kill things that go bump in the dark between stars. The displays behind her showed the positions of Krex's fleet, complete with ship names, crew complements, and tactical capabilities. So when you see a human, civilian, Admiral, remember this conversation. Remember that the sweet old lady serving you coffee might have once eliminated an entire enemy platoon with nothing but a bent spoon and righteous fury. Remember that the teenager bagging your groceries might know 17 different ways to disable your powered armor using common household items. Sarah picked up her cup again and took a long, deliberate sip. We don't wear our wars on our sleeves, Admiral. We carry them in our hearts, our minds, and our muscle memory. We look like civilians because we choose to look like civilians. It's not weakness, it's strategy. Krex found his voice. What do you want? What I want is simple. I want you to withdraw your fleet from our space. I want you to return our people you've captured. And I want you to never, ever threaten Earth or her colonies again. And if I refuse? Sarah's smile returned, bright and terrifying. Then you'll discover why we keep our most dangerous soldiers looking like the people you least expect. You'll learn what happens when a species that has spent millennia perfecting the art of war decides to stop playing nice. She paused, her head tilted slightly. Admiral, are you familiar with the human concept of going postal? No. It's when someone who looks perfectly normal, perfectly harmless, suddenly reveals they've been pushed too far. It never ends well for the people doing the pushing. Krex's tactical display began flashing red warnings. Ships were approaching from multiple vectors, but they weren't showing standard military signatures. They looked like cargo vessels, passenger liners, and mining ships. Admiral, Lieutenant Vex called urgently. We're detecting massive fleet movements throughout the system. Hundreds of ships, but they're all showing civilian registrations. Sarah's laugh echoed across the bridge. Oh, those aren't civilian ships, Admiral. Well, they are, but they're not. You see, every merchant vessel in human space is built to military specifications. Every passenger liner can be converted to a troop transport in under an hour. Every mining ship carries enough firepower to level a city. The display showed the approaching ships powering up weapon systems that should never have existed on civilian vessels. We learned a long time ago that the best way to hide a military is to make it look like anything but a military. Every human colony is a fortress. Every human city is a weapon. Every human citizen is a soldier waiting for the right moment to reveal their true nature. Krex's fleet was now surrounded by thousands of ships, all civilian in appearance, all bristling with enough weaponry to reduce his forces to cosmic dust. You wanted to know why Earth keeps its most dangerous soldiers looking like civilians, Admiral? Sarah's voice was now ice cold. It's because when everyone is a potential threat, your enemies never know where the real danger is coming from. They spend so much time looking for uniforms and ranks and military formations that they miss the real warriors standing right in front of them. She finished her drink and set the cup down with deliberate care. You have 24 hours to withdraw from our space, Admiral Krex. If you're still here when the time expires, you'll discover just how dangerous Earth's civilians can be when we stop pretending to be harmless. The transmission ended, leaving Krex staring at a blank screen while warning klaxons wailed throughout his ship. Outside his viewports, thousands of vessels that looked like anything but warships waited in perfect formation, their weapons powered and ready. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Zephin Krex began to understand what true fear felt like. And somewhere on a distant space station, an old man named Bob Martinez was teaching his grandchildren how to tie fishing knots. His weather hand steady despite the plasma burns on his knuckles from his recent peaceful negotiation with some uninvited guests. The Empire was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their numbers. It was their ability to hide monsters behind the faces of angels and warriors behind the masks of ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. 18 hours had passed since Sarah Chen's ultimatum, and Admiral Krex hadn't slept a moment. His tactical officers had run every simulation possible, and each one ended the same way: complete annihilation of his fleet. The humans had surrounded them with what appeared to be a civilian flotilla, but every scan revealed weapon systems that defied conventional military thinking. "Sir," Lieutenant Vex whispered, approaching a command chair with visible reluctance, "we're receiving another transmission. This time it's from multiple sources." Krex's stomach dropped. "Show me." The main display flickered to life, splitting into dozens of smaller screens. Each one showed a different human, and none of them looked like soldiers. There was a young woman in a bakery apron covered in flour, a middle-aged man in mechanics overalls, grease stains on his hands, a grandmother knitting in a rocking chair, a teenager with paint-stained fingers, a librarian surrounded by books. But their eyes all held the same cold calculation that Krex had learned to fear. The young baker spoke first, her voice sweet as honey. "Hello, Admiral. I'm Jenny Walsh from New Geneva Colony. I run a little pastry shop down on Baker Street." She held up a tray of delicate-looking cookies, decorated with what looked like flowers. "These are my specialty. Sugar cookies with a special icing recipe I learned from my father." The mechanic cleared his throat. "Name's Rick Kowalski, Admiral. I fix shuttles and atmospheric processors on Kepler Station. Been doing it for 23 years now." He wiped his hands on a rag, leaving fresh oil stains. "Funny thing about engines, they're all pretty much the same once you understand the principles." The grandmother smiled warmly, her needles clicking rhythmically. "I'm Dorothy, Kim, dear. Everyone calls me Grandma'd. I've been knitting for 70 years, ever since I was a little girl on Mars Colony." One by one, they introduced themselves. Teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, artists. Each one more normal-looking than the last. Each one making Krex's skin crawl with an inexplicable dread. Sarah Chen's voice cut through their introductions. "Admiral, I thought you might like to meet some of our other civilians. They wanted to share their hobbies with you." Jenny the baker's smile never wavered as she continued. "You see, my father was a chemical warfare specialist during the Proxima Rebellion. He taught me that the most effective poisons are the ones that taste delicious going down." She took a bite of her own cookie and chewed thoughtfully. "These particular cookies contain a neurotoxin derived from Rigelian fire moss. Completely tasteless, completely odorless, and completely lethal within 30 minutes. Rick the mechanic nodded approvingly. "That's real artistry right there. Me, I'm more of a hands-on kind of guy. You know what I learned fixing all those engines? I learned how to make them explode exactly when and where I want them to. He gestured to something off-screen. That cargo hauler that's been docked to your starboard airlock for the past 6 hours? The one your people cleared as containing humanitarian supplies? Well, it does contain supplies. Medical supplies, food rations, and approximately 4,000 kilograms of military-grade explosives wired to the ship's fusion core. Krex's bridge crew scrambled to their stations, panic evident in their movements. Oh, don't bother trying to disconnect it, Rick continued cheerfully. I also learned a lot about remote detonators during my time in the engineering corps. Real useful skill set that. Grandma looked up from her knitting, her needles never stopping their rhythmic clicking. I make the most wonderful sweaters, Admiral. Would you like to know what I'm knitting right now? Without waiting for an answer, she held up her work. It looked like a normal scarf, except for metallic thread woven throughout the fabric. This is memory wire, dear. Programmable smart metal that can reshape itself on command. During the Titan siege, I knitted garrotes for our special operations teams. Silent, invisible, and absolutely deadly. Her needles clicked faster. I'm currently knitting targeting solutions for the weapons platforms hidden throughout the system. Each stitch represents a firing solution for your fleet. The teenager with paint-stained fingers grinned and held up what looked like a child's drawing. I'm Alex Chen, Sarah's nephew. I'm studying art at the Luna Academy. The drawing showed spaceships exploding in brilliant colors. My professors say I have a real talent for depicting destruction. They should know most of them use to design weapons for the Colonial Defense Force. Alex's voice took on an eerie, sing-song quality. I've been tracking your ship's movement patterns, Admiral. Did you know that your flagship follows the same evasive algorithms as a Centauri battlecruiser? It's almost like you're using stolen technology. The child's drawing suddenly looked less innocent and more like a detailed tactical analysis. I painted 17 different scenarios where your fleet gets completely destroyed. Want to see my favorites? The librarian finally spoke, her voice soft and measured. I'm Helen Rodriguez, head librarian at the Archive Station. I specialize in historical research and information warfare. She turned a page in the book she was holding. This is a first edition copy of Advanced Psychological Operations in Deep Space Conflicts. Fascinating read. It has a whole chapter on how to break enemy morale using targeted personal information. She looked directly at Krex, her eyes suddenly sharp as razors. For instance, Admiral, did you know that your mate Zalera and your offspring Krex are currently visiting the healing centers on board Hack Prime? Routine medical examinations, according to the official records. But I also know that Zalera has been experiencing stress-related health issues ever since she deployed to the frontier. And young Krex has been having nightmares about his father never coming home. Krex felt his blood turn to ice. That information was classified at the highest levels of Vorthack security. Helen smiled sadly. Information warfare isn't about weapons, Admiral. It's about knowing everything about your enemy and making sure they know that you know. It's about making them understand that there is nowhere they can hide, nothing they can keep secret, and no one they can protect if they choose to remain your enemy. Sarah Chun reappeared on the main screen, her image overlaying the others. Are you beginning to understand, Admiral? Every human you see, every person living their quiet civilian life, they all have skills. Skills learned through centuries of conflict, passed down through generations, refined and perfected through constant practice. She gestured to the people on the screens around her. Jenny learned chemistry by helping her father develop biological weapons. Rick learned engineering while serving in the Demolitions Corps. Dorothy learned pattern recognition and strategic planning during the Mars siege. Alex learned tactical analysis from his mother, who commanded a battle group during the Saturn campaign. Helen learned information gathering and psychological warfare during her time with colonial intelligence. The displays began showing classified Vorthack military documents, fleet movements, tactical plans, and personal files. We don't just look like civilians, Admiral. We are civilians. But we're civilians who have spent our entire history learning how to kill things that threaten us. We're civilians who pass down the art of war like family recipes, who teach our children to calculate firing solutions while they learn to read, who knit sweaters and build gardens and plan elaborate deaths for our enemies all at the same time. Krex's communications officer looked up from her station, her face pale. "Sir, they've accessed our entire database. Personnel files, tactical information, fleet positions, everything." Sarah nodded approvingly. That would be Helen's work. She's very thorough. You'll also find that your weapon systems are currently locked out, your navigation is offline, and your life support is running on backup power. Jenny's cookies weren't just for show, Admiral. We've been introducing nanoscale agents into your air recycling system for the past 3 hours. Nothing lethal, mind you, just something to make your crew more cooperative and less likely to make unfortunate decisions. Rick laughed and held up a small device. "And that explosion I mentioned, it's not just on your ship, Admiral. Every vessel in your fleet currently has one of my little surprises attached to it. Amazing what people will let aboard when it's disguised as humanitarian aid." Dorothy held up her knitting, the pattern now clearly visible as a complex tactical grid. "The targeting solutions are complete, dear. Every one of your ships is currently painted by 17 different weapons platforms. Some are hidden in asteroids, some are disguised as navigation beacons, and some are built into the very space stations you thought were civilian installations." Alex waved his paintbrush excitedly. "And the best part is, even if you somehow escaped, we know exactly where you go. I've been analyzing your supply routes, your communication patterns, and your psychological profiles. I know where your families live, where your bases are hidden, and exactly how to make your entire empire collapse like a house of cards." Helen closed her book with a soft snap. "The thing about information warfare, Admiral, is that once you lose the information war, everything else becomes academic. We know everything about you, and you know nothing about us except what we choose to reveal. That's not a battle. That's an execution waiting to happen." Sarah's voice became deadly serious. 6 hours, Admiral. 6 hours remain of your 24-hour deadline. Your options are simple. Withdraw your fleet and never return, or discover what happens when Earth's civilians stop being polite. The screen showing the various humans began winking out one by one, each person returning to their normal activities. Jenny went back to decorating cookies. Rick returned to his engine repairs. Dorothy continued knitting. Alex kept painting. Helen opened another book, but their eyes remained cold, calculating, and utterly inhuman in their perfect, terrifying focus. Finally, only Sarah remained on the screen. "One last thing, Admiral. In case you're wondering why we're giving you this chance to leave peacefully, it's not mercy. It's not compassion. It's simple practicality." Her smile was razor-sharp. "Dead enemies can't spread stories about what happens to people who threaten Earth. But survivors can. Survivors can go home and tell their leaders, their families, their entire civilization about the day they discover that humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology or our numbers." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's the fact that we never, ever stop learning new ways to kill our enemies, and we never, ever forget to teach those skills to our children." The transmission ended. Admiral Krex sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders that he couldn't bring himself to give. Outside, thousands of civilian ships waited patiently, their ordinary-looking crews probably knitting scarves and baking cookies and painting pictures while simultaneously calculating exactly how to reduce his entire fleet to constituent atoms. "Sir," Lieutenant Vex whispered. Krex closed his eyes and felt the weight of 7 centuries of Vorthak military tradition crashing down around him. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "We're withdrawing." "Sir." "You heard me, Lieutenant. We're withdrawing. Set course for Vorthak space, maximum speed." As his ships began their retreat, Krex caught a final transmission from the human fleet. It was audio only, but he recognized the voice immediately. Jenny the baker was humming while she worked, her voice sweet and cheerful as she went about her innocent civilian business of decorating cookies and planning the deaths of anyone foolish enough to threaten her home. The Empire had learned its lesson. Earth's most dangerous soldiers would always look like the last people you'd ever suspect, and by the time you realize your mistake, it would already be far too late to do anything about it. Somewhere in the distance, an old man named Bob Martinez was teaching his grandchildren how to fish, his weather hand steady as he tied knots that could catch fish or garrote enemies with equal efficiency. And they all lived happily ever after.